This ZeroNow program is brought to you with the support of our founding partners.
So let's introduce Antoinette King, our very first panelist, and returning to conversations. Antoinette King, if you wouldn't mind just providing a little background on yourself and your connection to this whole topic of cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I always am grateful for being able to participate in any ZeroNow event. I love the organization and truly believe in the cause. My name is Antoinette King. I'm the founder of Credo Cyber Consulting. I have 25 plus years, I'm just stopping it at the 25 plus. I'm not going any further. In security, I started in physical security many moons ago, and about 8 years ago transitioned over to cybersecurity because I started recognizing that security is a very holistic picture, right? It's not just physical security or cybersecurity as two separate entities. But now that we are network based in pretty much everything that we do, I needed to learn more about the cyber realm. So I went back to school, got my master's in cyber policy and risk analysis, wrote a couple of books on the topic. One is called The Digital Citizen's Guide to Cybersecurity, How to Stay Safe and Empowered Online. And my latest book is called Chalk Dust to Digital Trust. And I co-authored it with a data privacy officer at a school district out in Western New York, with the goal to help school districts understand the threat landscape and the things that they should be doing within their districts in order to secure their networks. So I'm very excited about this topic today. There's a lot of new and emerging threats that are out there, and especially these emerging threats targeting school districts because of how sensitive the data is of minors, right? Like all of our data has already been exposed, but young people's data is fresh and new, and it's kind of the most valuable. So it's very important topic, and I appreciate being a participant.
It is, and we'll have links to Antoinette's two books in the replay chat, as well as some white papers and other resources that our panelists have to share. And it makes a great holiday gift too, by the way. Good timing on that. A great stocking stuffer. Next, we have Dr. Marnie Hazelton from Englewood Public School District, superintendent, and we share a common experience when it comes to cybersecurity. But Dr. Hazelton, would you mind just providing your background and connection to the topic?
Thank you, Ara, and thank you for ZeroNow for inviting me to be a part of this very important panel. Dr. Marnie Hazelton, Superintendent of Schools here in Englewood, New Jersey, which is located in Bergen County, approximately 6 miles outside of Manhattan. So we are an urban, suburban community, K-12 school district, approximately 2,900 students, 5 schools, great community. We were unfortunately the victim of a ransomware attack, cyber attack back in April 2024, where all of our servers except one were attacked and the data held for ransom by threat actors located in Romania. All of our student data, financial data was stolen and held for ransom. It was like a bad James Bond movie. I had read about security breaches and hacks targeting school districts, first time that I had ever undergone such an attack. And it will not only test your infrastructure, but also your leadership capabilities and how we survived and rebuilt from that attack is what I am here to share with you today. So thank you, and I look forward to a robust discussion.
Yeah, we look forward to diving into that experience. As I mentioned, I had a similar situation at a private school as well. And one of those characters in that James Bond film might be Nathan Shanks, who's Global General Manager at Motorola for Cyber. Nathan, if you wouldn't mind just sharing your background and connection to the topic, please.
Well, hopefully I'm on the right side of that film. So I'm presently responsible for Motorola's cyber practice. This is the client-facing, going into customer environments. We have a very heavy emphasis on public safety. Large portion of our client base is schools. I've been in cyber before we called it that. I got into it in the 90s. I have served in basically this capacity at various Fortune 500s pretty much my whole career. So I'm excited to be here. this is a very complex subject, and as I've said in the past, it's gotten more complex, and it will continue to get more complex. And as we continue to try to have all these incredibly intelligent people find ways, to prevent it, it seems to continue to, turn into a very difficult thing to get our hands around. So I'm really appreciative of ZeroNow putting this discussion together, and look forward to learning as much as we're talking.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan. Along that note, Antoinette, I mean, we had a conversation, similar conversation, maybe 2 or 3 years ago about cyber. And from your perspective, how has the cyber threat landscape changed in K-12 or since our last discussion 2.5 years ago?
Sure. So the one thing that hasn't changed is that schools are disproportionately targeted as amongst other sectors across all of the sectors of critical infrastructure, mostly because of the sensitive nature of the data, but also, in my opinion, schools are very complex systems of systems, right? I almost want to say it's more complex than a banking system, because at least the banking system has the funding to protect their data, whereas school districts are very limited in financial resources and often human capital to be able to implement the enterprise security that they need. Since the last conversation that we had, which was just we were fresh out of COVID, and we had transitioned a lot of educational tools to ed tech, we now see districts that are almost 100% reliant on technology tools, to the point where when we're working on business continuity planning or disaster recovery planning, there are districts that are like, we don't know what we would do if we lost access to the internet. And I was like, don't you remember just 5 years ago, we were in books and pens and paper, right? Like, we can have that backup plan, but we have become so reliant on these third-party software tools, assessment tools, adaptive learning tools, that it almost renders districts completely incapable of the mission of education if they are victims of these types of attacks, which means that the attackers know how desperate schools truly are, which then increases the rate at which they're being attacked. The other major difference, and Nathan, I'd love to hear your input on this, in my opinion, is the cost to entry for cyber criminals is very, very low these days. So back in the day, they had to be more sophisticated. They had to understand code and know how to do certain things, very sophisticated things on the back end, in order to get into a network or to launch an attack. Now, with AI, they're using AI to create the entire attack through the dark web chat GPT type tools, where they can say, create this malware with that will attack this operating system with these vulnerabilities, and it spits it back out for $500, and it gives you the list of people that you can send it out to. So whereas before these cyber attackers needed to be a little sophisticated, now the cost of entry is very, very low. So it's a trillion-dollar business. You can go out and buy the lists. You can actually hire somebody to do the attack, launch the attack for you. And so with all of these things, as Nathan said in his intro, it's a cat and mouse game. And it's just, the more we finally get a handle on things, the more sophisticated things become. And the faster that these technologies lean towards using AI type language models, the more we're going to have to run around and try to figure out how are we going to fight against these things. And Nathan, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, there used to be an expression that we would say in 2015 that no one would ever get fired if you were exploited by a $5 million exploit, right? If the cost to attack you is really high, you've done your job, your controls are in place. No one would spend $5 million to attack a school. It just didn't exist because the ROI wasn't there. In that same time frame, the average ransom was $300 in 2015. Today, and I think you're going to hear this, even from our panelists, that millions is on the table, right? So no one's going to write a $5 million exploit to make $300, but if you can write a $20 exploit to make $1 million, that sounds like a much more attractive proposition. And that's very real. The other component, and I like to add to the unique challenge I think most schools struggle with, like, it's in the very nature of the philosophy of a school. It's about information sharing. That's not a bank's philosophy. You've got a lot of big industrial manufacturers that can just say, we're just going to go dark. school doesn't have that even on the table. Why would you? Like the whole purpose of a school is to share. So that then opens you up to tremendously more exposure. And you said disproportional, and that's exactly why. If the nature of your business is to share and collaborate, well, guess what happens? You expose yourself to everyone that wants to share and collaborate, whether positively or negatively. But yeah, there's unquestionably the cost of exploit has dramatically dropped. And unquestionably the gain when it works is probably even more so. So those two things together do not make a great recipe.
Yeah, and I agree with Nathan and Antoinette. The data that they can mine from school districts, it is fresh, and you can just duplicate identities over and over, thousands and thousands of fresh birth dates and social security numbers. School districts are now required to have cyber insurance. And unfortunately for Inglewood, prior to me becoming superintendent, our deductible was $250,000 because we did not put into place a two-factor authentication mechanism. And it allowed the threat actors to really breach our system and wreak havoc. And we ended up spending close to well over $1 million to rebuild our system, to hire consultants. When the threat actors identified themselves, the initial ransom was $900,000 that they wanted in Bitcoins. And so we had to enter into a contract with a third party to negotiate that and purchase the Bitcoins. We had multiple conversations, and I'm laughing because it's just insane. Going back to what we had to go through with daily meetings with Homeland Security and the FBI, and then eventually the U.S. Treasury Department involved themselves and said that we could no longer negotiate with these threat actors because they were placed on a watch list. And it became illegal for us to negotiate with these threat actors. So they resorted to the dark web with a time clock of a countdown. If anyone wanted to buy the Inglewood Public School District's data, it was up for sale unless we paid this ransom. So it was beyond bizarre, to say the least.
So what happened in the end, Dr. Hazelton?
We did not pay. They released our data anyway. And so we, prior to the data being released, we immediately shared the information with our school community. That was very important, transparency. For us, the primary goal in the first week or two of identifying the incident, we needed to make payroll. We did not have any data. We're talking about all of our financial data being held for ransom. And not only in the school district, but in any work environment, when your employees are running the risk of not receiving their paycheck, let me tell you, the pressure is on. So that became our primary focus, to ensure that our employees receive their next paycheck. And the majority of people working in the district, they have direct pay. And Nathan mentioned that everything is digitized. Everything is on the computer. And so the hackers, they know how desperate we are to get our information back. And because our focus was on, we need to address payroll, mistakes were made as far as tax withholdings. Because what we were able to do, we were able just to roll everything over, and rolling everything over without checks and balances. Of course, you're going to make mistakes. With a school district, our fiscal year ends June 30th and starts again July 1. We don't run January to January like the rest, like a normal business. So all of those things were put into play. And it was just making sure that we kept the unions updated, the board, and meeting every day with our external consultants to guide us through the process.
What's interesting, we were chatting yesterday. I had a similar situation at the school I was on the board of a number of years ago. where somebody received an email and they clicked on a link to download the latest version of Microsoft Word. It's time to upgrade. Boom, our entire network was taken hostage by ransomware. Similar situation. In your school, how did the actor get into your network to initiate that ransomware attack?
A few desktop computers were left open. Also, when the initial attack occurred, and we were instructed by one of our external consultants to unplug every computer in the district. That was not done immediately. So our hackers were able to penetrate our system twice within a 24 to 48 hour period. Also going back to that two-factor authentication that was not done when it was recommended prior to the hack. And just a series of errors that we are now addressing through our different policies and things of that nature. But a lot of human error. You know, hindsight is always 20/20. And you don't think it could happen to you until it happens to you.
Exactly, exactly. I still have PTSD from that experience. Nathan.
Yeah, well, it certainly doesn't take the pain away, but hopefully it makes you feel a little bit better. You're not the only one that's gone through it. What I think is surprising, most people, we do a lot of preparation, we do a lot of planning, we do a lot of tabletop exercises, and I am blown away with how many people would say, no, of course not. I'm not going to pay the ransom. I mean, we've got all these things. There's no way I'm going to. And then you can't make payroll. You know, completely changes the dynamic of the discussion. And so we go back to that cost that you incurred. Now, it wasn't just the technology cost and the infrastructure cost and kind of the pain and suffering the community felt. It was all of those things together. And so when you start talking about this topic of, oh, you know, cybersecurity is important, it's a multi-million-dollar problem and a community impact problem, right? And so you do have to start making some of those choices. And it's way more frequently than the public would like to admit how often people do, in fact, actually pay the ransom. So everyone to get to that decision is usually absolutely not, I don't negotiate with terrorists, to, maybe that number's right. You know, maybe we could get into a discussion. So certainly don't feel bad that's where you're at. I think a majority of people in that seat have exactly the same thought run through their mind and go through that. So it is very prolific, unfortunately, and it actually gets paid out a lot more than you think.
Well, go ahead, please.
While we were going back and forth whether to pay or not to pay, various scenarios were given to us because what they wanted us to pay for, the return of the data, they were going to give us some type of key to unlock everything. And all the different scenarios were laid out. Okay, you can pay the $900,000 in Bitcoin and you get your data back. You can pay and you get your data back, but now it's corrupted and encrypted. You can pay and you still don't get your data back, and they're going to release it anyway. So all of those things had to be considered and measured. In the end, we wanted to pay until the U.S. Treasury Department stepped in and prevented us from paying. We were ready to pay. And in the end, like I said, the data was released anyway.
Well, and what I think probably the biggest underlying theme of everything we talk about with ZeroNow is prevention. And, you know, how do you get ahead of this so you're not put in a situation where you have to respond and deal with this like we both went through and others have gone through. So we do have a number of school administrators attending in this program. Now, we had a roundtable last week with school administrators on a national basis talking about cybersecurity, and you know, the typical perception was it's an IT issue, but Antoinette, what's the biggest misconception that school leaders have about cybersecurity today? Is it truly is it just an IT thing, like IT directors got this, or is it? And Dr. Hazelton, I'd obviously love to get your perspective on this as well. But Antoinette, since you work with schools all week,
every day,
yeah, every day, not just this
came
week.
Back from one actually.
Exactly.
So the biggest one is it's never going to happen to us, right? Our school is not big enough for that to happen to us. And definitely that it is, you know, an IT responsibility where, you know, it's challenging in a school district for technology directors in general because there are so many layers. When you say technology director, that means something different in every single district. Like some people are responsible for the educational technology, and then they have a network specialist that does the infrastructure. Some are responsible for infrastructure and educational technology. Some are data privacy officers. Like there's so many different facets of tech director. But cybersecurity has never been a single role in a school district. Like tech director does not equal cybersecurity. IT does not equal cybersecurity. Those are two separate domains. And often people who are network specialists are not necessarily trained in cybersecurity. They're trained in making sure that the network works and that people can get the information they need to get when they need to get it. So that misconception that cybersecurity is the tech director's responsibility is that they may not have the right training to even know where to start or how to implement cybersecurity within a network. The other big thing for me, as I mentioned, is that most of the systems now are cloud-based. So a lot of the things that you have control over, like you don't even have control over anymore because you're using a third party for that system. So it is a complex environment, and being able to have the right vendor supply chain risk assessment, being able to have the right conversations with the various different vendors, and ensuring that you even know where your sensitive data is being housed, how it's being used, how it's being transported, is a huge undertaking. And so just pushing it onto the IT department is very dangerous because they're not the ones necessarily even procuring the technology. So you've got other departments that are procuring technology. If they're not vetted as a governance team, as a governance group where everybody's got input and insight into it, it just, again, increases risk.
Dr. Hazelton.
Absolutely agree. This does not all fall at the feet of our IT department. Even prior to the hacking, I met weekly in a cabinet and an extended cabinet meeting with all of my directors, curriculum folks, including the head of IT. Once we were hacked, every meeting, every day, we had our assistant superintendent, our HR person, our business person, as well as the IT person in all of those meetings. We have a wonderful director of IT now, and Ms. Laparty. She ensures that we undertake professional development in how to identify phishing emails. Like you had mentioned that, someone innocently opens up an email asking them to update their password or asking for financial data. And as teachers and educators, we are not the experts, and they are phishing, and they are, to this day, people still receive emails or text messages from me asking a weird question. And we know now they will double check. Dr. Hazelton, did you just text me or send me something asking me for, my social security number? No, I did not. So we are still facing the fallout from our attack, but everyone is keenly aware and hypersensitive that you check and double check everything. Even if I get something from New Jersey State Department and it looks kind of fishy, I don't open it. I forward it to IT and ask them, is this a scam? Is this a phishing email? And we also get test emails that will test us on, whether or not we open it based on what the email address looks like. So we have been hypersensitive in participating in those professional development activities, and also following the directives and recommendations from our consultants. A lot of times, I don't know why we do this. We hire consultants and then we don't follow their recommendations.
You're the recommendation on that shelf over there.
Amen.
It's odd.
Go figure.
Well, I think Annette did a really nice job kind of creating a delineation, but I think I can represent cyber. We've done a really good job confusing people. Like, we're incredible at it. Like, you need access to something remotely. Well, now it's a security product, but it's not really, but it is. When you talk about on the systems themselves, the desktops and servers, same thing. Is this a device to add functionality and improve quality, or is it a security feature and function? I can go down the line. Every single part of your environment now has a security enriched, and sometimes you're buying it from a major security vendor supplier that happens to also serve an essential component for, working from home. And so we've made it incredibly confusing, honestly. Like half the time when you see new features come out, you're like, wait a minute, isn't that a whole industry? Like, why is that a feature of this? So I appreciate why people are very confused about who's accountable, how they're accountable. And then even from a skill set perspective, people that specialize in it are, have incredibly focused skills. And so it's even hard for any institution, but especially a public institution, to collect the right amount of experts to accomplish the task. So I think what you were mentioning just then, focus on a lot of the basics, focus on, really the areas that you can control and you do have a large attack surface on. Email and phishing happens to be one of the greatest of all of them. And you need specialists that know how to do that. And so we have made it very confusing. There's a lot of kind of consolidation that has happened in the technology world, not just the security world.
Well, on that note, Nathan, I mean, and Jose Figueroa made a very important point here that cybersecurity seems like an afterthought when we do this. And one of the things that we've been talking about and within the ZeroNow community is looking at things holistically, baking all the security into your master planning, right? Building in your physical security, your cyber security, in with your facilities, your architecture, all these things it's basically looking through the world through a safety and security lens, rather than doing what you need to do and then bolt on safety and security afterwards and looking at it from that lens. So, Antoinette and Nathan, one of the things that we, talk about in the world of IoT, right? Like every single device on your network is a vulnerability. So how do you protect against those cyber threats? Because if you have a bad actor taking out your surveillance camera system or your access control system, how do you defend against that? Do you want to address that, Antoinette? And then Nathan, if you're interested.
Yeah, sure. I was actually going to let Nathan go first because I feel like
sure. Let's do it. Well, one of the famous quotes was, if you build $1 billion of anything, it's probably not going to be maintained very well. Excluding Apple, that's generally true. When you have a billion light switches you manufacture, how many times do you update the firmware on your light switch? Well, unfortunately, that's actually not a fictitious example anymore. Smart switches require updates. So if you think about this from an IoT perspective, it's just an operating system. It's just a logical access asset. We don't think about them that way. And certainly, a big part of our business is cameras. I have a camera right now. It's got an NVIDIA video card on it. If you want to do facial recognition and modeling on the fly, on the line, you got to be as close to the asset as possible. I think that's crazy. Like, I recently seen this thing. I was like, I couldn't believe it myself. The amount of compute that we can now put on a device looks like a server from 5 years ago. And we're building them into our sprinklers. Again, also a very real scenario. And so how do you keep that updated? And how do you maintain that same hygiene? And that's why I said, like, as it feels like we're solving some of these kind of, critical infrastructure management issues, and then we just introduce brand new ones. I think you just hit the nerve, right? Like, here's a brand new one. Like, how are you going to manage? You think about in a domestic home, there are something like 250 light bulbs. They all have IP addresses now. Think about a school. How many thousands of IP addresses did you just introduce that all have an operating system on? Absolutely bonkers. So I think it's created this really, by the way, the functionality in many cases, you can save lots of money on your light bill. That's awesome. You don't have to replace them that often. That's awesome. But what have we done? Now we've introduced another vector. And so it's a very complicated, and rightfully having a conversation about it is the thing that we should be doing, because it isn't a yes or a no. I've worked on smart grids projects. We actually worked on for a large stadium. Their return on energy was 6 months. They spent $90 million on an energy optimization project to go to IoT. They made it back in 6 months. Wow. So some of these infrastructure projects are super essential, but then, you look at it 5 years later and you're like, oh my gosh, can you imagine how much unpatched Windows is running in that stadium right now? I can't. So it's a complicated subject. It's important to balance the need to what you want the long-term outcome to be. But you're going to have to deal with it. You're not going to have a choice. You're going to have to figure out how to both regulate and maintain if you've decided to go that direction.
I also think one of the major issues that I've experienced, just because I grew up in the security industry during the transition to network-based security, is that we were not thinking about, and I'm going to say this holds true for most IoT and industrial IoT devices, we're not thinking about security. We're thinking about functionality and first to market. That is the goal. That is the business model. The vast majority of other devices, data network type devices, security is at the forefront of how they're going to do what they do, because the cyber events are happening, attacks are happening, third-party supply chain attacks are happening. And so everybody that's on the traditional network side, they all have that as part of baked into their culture. That doesn't exist in industrial IoT and IoT. It's wanting to get a product out there as quickly as possible and be the first to have whatever it is that item is to solve whatever the problem is that we're trying to solve. And so when you don't have the capability to solve for that, you now opened up a very large, again, threat attack surface for you. And I apologize. I have a second phone that I didn't turn the ringer off. So please excuse me. Rookie move. But that whole thought process, as Nathan said, we have invested now in a technology that's going to turn all our lights on and off. But if we haven't also applied the same controls around that technology, we've basically just invested everything that we have in technology controls and training for our data network and left the front door wide open. Right. And so we've all heard about the attacks coming in on printers and things like that. But because of the compute power now at the edge in physical security devices and in operational security devices, we can use that technology to then launch attacks on other people. Right. So people are seeing these edge devices as just other vectors to steal the compute power. So and this is beyond ransomware and data exfiltration. This is now how can we steal that compute power to execute much larger attacks on other organizations?
Sounds like a James Bond movie. So here's a great question that Randy Merced asks. This is for Nathan. And by the way, if you have questions, we only have about 20 minutes left. So if you could just type in the Q&A. This is a great question because do cloud-based solutions expose us for cyber threats more so than on-prem? What is the difference between on-prem and cloud-based solutions as far as cyber threats, Nathan?
Well, the analogy I like to use here is what's worse, 1,000 machines with one problem or one machine with 1,000 problems? And the answer is they're both exactly the same problem. Unfortunately, I don't know of a SaaS-based platform that has not had a significant compromise, but here's the advice I will give. It is shifting a problem, but it actually does also provide business opportunity. So typically, if you are using a SaaS provider, you can include conditions if they do have a breach, and they will have to follow a protocol. The folks over at Salesforce have a substantially larger security team than you do, and I don't even need to know who you are. Last count, I think I had 2,500 full-time cybersecurity people at Salesforce. That's larger than Bank of America had at some point. So they will do things maturely, but I can also point to a point in time almost every one of them had a substantial breach. So one, that's where you can use policy and contracting and your legal prowess and flex. Secondly, the function that you're going to get out of it. A lot of the times people will use a cloud service and then just replicating something that they're doing on site. And so they're really not decreasing the amount of exposure or impact. This happens a lot with tools like idle tools, where we use a piece of it, but the rest of the workflow is somewhere else. It doesn't really help shift the risk out. So my strategy on it is, if you're going to shift hard. Make sure they're kind of encompassing everything within their environment. You understand what their controls are. You hold them accountable to providing you the data output necessary. But in many cases, especially lower funded or places that have less of a diverse security skill set, it may actually be a good trade-off to use a SaaS platform. But with that caveat as being, I just got announced from one of my suppliers that they had a principal breach 2 weeks ago. So it's not like one of those things that you're ever going to hedge yourself against, but if you're managing or maintaining a substantial number of systems on site, take a very serious look at them.
Now, I think my connection is bad here. Can you guys hear me?
In your supply chain security and having the conversations with your suppliers and having them fill out any, getting any of their SOC reports, or if they're ISO certified or something like that, just transferring that risk onto them, and then also doing your due diligence to make sure the vendors you choose are actually doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. So it's more complex than SaaS versus did I lock up?
No, I locked up. Sorry, Antoinette.
Okay. I was like, I'm talking with my hands,
Yeah.
and I might be have this crazy look on my face.
Yeah.
That's my biggest fear. But if you're having conversations with your suppliers and just making sure that they're doing their due diligence, then you're going to mitigate some of that risk. But if you're just randomly selecting a SaaS provider and you don't know what they're doing, then you might be increasing your risk. So it's a lot more complex than just cloud versus on-prem.
Well, and by the way,
No,
vendor risk assessment is like another we're talking about what's changed in the last 5 to 10. It used to be, if you were to call your SaaS provider in 2015 and be like, hey, can I get this? They'd just say no, like pound sand, like you're not going to get it. In 2025, they're like, yeah, definitely. Here you go. And here you go. And you probably get more information than you wanted out of them. So 100% you should be asking for this data, and they should be providing it. If they can't, they probably don't have the chops necessary to run the platform.
No, I know that Dr. Hazelton probably has just under 2,500 people just focused on cyber in her district. Just a few under. But Dr. Hazelton, if you wouldn't mind sharing with you, so if with limited budgets, how do you prioritize what to spend, where to spend money on cyber related issues?
Well, prior to the security breach, it wasn't a priority. Of course, curriculum is the priority. However, once we were attacked and all the data was stolen, and not only the priority to meet payroll, as we entered into a new school year and ending the calendar year, we were afraid that we could not produce W-2 forms. We didn't have the information. So it became a priority. Like I said, we spent close to $1 million to restore and rebuild our data. We are still not where we need to be. Districts across the country, our school budgets, we have taken a huge hit as far as our budgets are concerned on the state and the federal level. So it's a juggling game that we're playing. We have two major fixed costs in school districts: payroll and health benefits. And in January, health benefits are going up. Payroll and health benefits may suck maybe 85. I'm not supposed to say that word. I'm sorry. So they would take up about 85% of our school budget. 85% right there. So that leaves 15% of a school budget left to deal with security, infrastructure, and other things. But our fixed costs, payroll, employee benefits, it's already spoken for. And we know that we have to prioritize cybersecurity, and then also the push toward AI and computer technology and computer science, which is a part of our curriculum. So it is a perfect storm. And we try to seek out non-competitive and competitive grants to help supplement some of the things that are not covered in our general budget. But it is a race on that hamster wheel to stay current, to stay ahead of all of the latest trends and what the community expects from us, what the board expects from us. And it's exhausting. But we get up every morning, we have a great team, and we put our best foot forward, and we try to do the best that we can.
Fantastic. And Antoinette, not only the author of 2 cybersecurity books, but you're also the author of the first draft of the ZeroNow position paper on foundational school cybersecurity. So going back to the question that Dr. Hazelton also addressed, if you have a limited budget, what are those foundational aspects of cyber that you should prioritize with limited funding?
Well, in my opinion, the most important piece to all of this is not the technology, it's the people. Investing in role-based security training with your employees so that they understand the nature of the data that they are working with, why it's important that they protect that data, what the school's position and culture is around cybersecurity and physical security, but just security in general, right? And how it will impact the district in the event that the data that they're processing, managing, or sharing is leaked or breached outside of the network. So to me, investing in education and getting the right people in the right places in order to make sure that you're protecting your network is the most important thing. Because as I said before, technology controls are great, but if you don't follow them, as Dr. Hazelton said, if you don't have MFA and somebody's sharing their credential with someone else, it's, you could put $1 million worth of technology controls in place and you leave the front door wide open. I just met with a district yesterday in a governance meeting that one of the principals said, well, we have an issue with our substitutes because they're not on rostered. So the teachers are giving the substitute their credentials when they're not there. I was speechless. I could not believe that I was hearing this. And then the other building principal was like, oh yeah, this is what we do. And we create a shared drive and then they just access the shared drive. And I'm like, whoa, we have this tech governance team for the sole purpose of protecting the data in the network. Nobody put 2 and 2 together that was a bad idea, right? So training and making sure that you have governance, these are things you can do without investing a penny, right? Is having a governance group, socializing within the leadership of how important these things are. This is not made to make people inconvenienced, right? These type of controls. But why it's important, what the regulations are in your state, in your county, whatever that is. And then from there, what are the top 5 things that we can invest in that's going to solve for the most highest security issues that we have. So you have to do a baseline assessment of where you're at, a true internal assessment to say, what controls do we have in place? Where are the gaps? And what are the top 5 things that we can knock out that's going to reduce the most amount of risk aside from training and governance?
And Antoinette, that goes back to the path of safer schools, because having a safety team, a leader, whether it's cyber or physical security, but assessing vulnerabilities before you spend a dime on anything. I mean, that's the whole thing, is like, where are your biggest gaps, depending on where you are. And you said something that's very important, which we always say in ZeroNow, is that, I mean, yeah, it's technology are just tools for people, but it really comes down to people. Technology it helps you become exponentially more effective in giving you superhuman powers, but you need to have people that are following processes and procedures. And Nathan, from your experience, where are school districts most vulnerable? I mean, is it the technology? Is it the people? Is it the processes like Antoinette just mentioned? Because you can have the best technology in the world, but if you don't have processes or people following that, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you're allowed to be frustrated. We as a species, when we invented the safety belt, it's very intuitive. You get in something that prevents you from hitting the dashboard. That's a pretty straightforward thing. A lot of what we've been talking about isn't that intuitive. You can come at this problem in a couple different ways. You can solve technology issues in multiple ways. Community sharing, as I mentioned, you're reacting to that recommendation. This person has done this for everything else, right? And that's why they did it, but it's obviously not a good idea. But it is their idea, and it wasn't an original idea because that's what they've been trained to do, is to collaborate. So the answer to your question is it's really the fundamental still. And I wish I couldn't say this. I wish we had a safety belt. The number of times we go into an environment that we're not talking about bleeding edge We're talking about things that are 6, 9, 10, 5 years old that are still sitting there operating that they don't even use anymore. It's really hard to prioritize that stuff. I'd rather you be teaching my kids too. Seriously. Like, why do you have to worry about what Microsoft is up to recently? But unfortunately, you kind of do. I reflect back on, there was a major cyber incident around a vulnerability that eventually got named Print Nightmare. And it was quite a nightmare. Any Windows system that had this print driver on it was accessible. Guess what? There's more Print Nightmare out in the world right now than there was at that time. Right? So when I say basics, I mean really kind of going back to the fundamentals. I like the idea if your team is more aware, then they're not going to create a community share and put all their passwords on it. Like, that's good. If you take it one step beyond that, how much stuff can you get rid of? Can you power anything down? Can you throw anything away? Can you focus on really basic stuff? And I'm telling you, it may sound very straightforward because it is. Like, we don't ever find any more. I mean, occasionally, we'll do 500 gigs in a year. Occasionally, we find some really fantastic celebrity vulnerability, as we call them. Almost always, it's someone got in because someone left a computer on that was no longer needed. So really the basics is what I would say. That doesn't come from just one day you wake up and you think you're going to start doing that stuff. I think focused on knowledge, making sure people are at least aware of how crazy the world is. Second guess when they walk by that office every day and look in and be like, why is that thing still on? That's the kind of stuff that I would say is the highest impact dollar to, investment ratio. If you want to talk about ROI or tech debt, like getting rid of stuff, shutting stuff down, really focusing on decommissioning legacy systems as much as humanly possible. Not only can you save a bunch of money and hopefully contribute to that very abysmal 15% that you were talking about, like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I would balance my budget. I certainly couldn't. But then, focus all your energy on those systems that are active, that are alive, that do actually serve a meaningful purpose.
Yeah, I have to absolutely agree with Nathan. Technology as a tool, I think COVID really it changed the dynamics, not for the good. Maybe a week after the cyber breach, teachers, love my teachers. What do we do now? What do you mean? You teach. This is a wonderful opportunity to get back to project-based learning, hands-on learning. Ooh, your kids, they cannot write. Now is the perfect time to work on penmanship because we are so dependent upon the internet and all of these different programs that are cyber-based, and the calls coming in. What do we do now? And my flippant response, now you teach. Now you teach. So we have to maintain that balance, and also a learning from this, a recovery and response plan. What do we do when this happens? Someone today from the county said, well, what is your recovery plan and your disaster recovery plan? And all that we have gone through in the last year and a half, I'm embarrassed to say, I had to think about it. I think we have one. It's just something we take for granted because we're living in the moment, trying to rebuild, trying to move forward. And something as so simple as what is the plan when this happens again? Is everyone going to be on the same page? Has it been documented? Has it been board approved? Are we talking about this so that everyone understands what to do when this happens again? And no.
Well, that's important, and I want to jump to Antoinette real quickly, but going back to the whole culture of safety, a number of years ago, I was at a cybersecurity company in the Northern Virginia area, and one of the directors I was meeting with had his password on a little pad next to his monitor because it's so long because they have to change their password every week. So it's hard to remember. And I think this is before they had password managers. But anyways, going back to the culture, best technology in the world. Antoinette, did you want to speak a little bit, because we only have a couple minutes left, but about how do you respond and have a response? I mean, that's a whole different topic in itself, but
Sure.
since Dr. Hazelton brought it up, we should definitely address that.
Yeah, so in New York State, the districts are required, and that's where I live. Districts are required to have an incident response plan, disaster recovery plan. They're required to adhere to the NIST standards, which also includes contingency and business continuity planning. But Dr. Hazelton, something that's really important about what you just said is you guys were so caught up in recovery, right? And get back to the mission of education, that one of the most important pieces in the cycle of that type of an event is the after action review. And it really should be done close to the event, because we suffer from trauma memory loss, right? Like nobody wants to go back to that moment when all of that was going on, and the daily meetings and the this and the that, right? But having like your group that experienced that as a team has a very big opportunity to have a very robust incident response and disaster recovery plan, because you went through it. It's challenging. Again, just before this call, I left the district that I'm working on a DRP, disaster recovery plan, with. It's challenging for a lot of people to take it seriously when they've never been through it. But the districts that I work with that have experienced something like this or akin to it, or almost, they had that almost moment and they were able to catch it, whatever it was, they're so laser focused, because they know that instant panic mode is not the time that you want to be creating the lists of people you need to contact. It's not the time when you want to be building a communications plan. It's not the time when you're first meeting for the first time the law enforcement people that are responsible for helping you to get through this. All of that should be set up in advance. Unfortunately, you didn't have the opportunity to do that, but I think having gone through it, that after action review will help you to build out a really robust plan. And tabletop exercises. Having you could tabletop on the exact same thing that happened to your district and say, what could we have done differently, right? And that's how you help build a more actionable plan. So tabletopping is very, very important.
Exactly, Antonio. I was jotting that down here. Tabletop, and exactly. I mean, that's probably one of the most effective approaches for any sort of crisis, whether it's cyber attack, active assailant, severe weather. I mean, there's so many different situations. An event at a sporting event, we were chatting about that earlier today. But tabletopping is it's a zero cost, easy to do. Let's make it happen. Think about it. Let's talk through the actions before you're actually faced with that situation. And given that we are actually out of time, and I know that there's some more questions that we did not get to that came in beforehand, so we'll respond to those in the afterwards. But just would love final thoughts from each of you. Nathan, if we wouldn't mind start with you, just final thoughts, any sort of takeaways for our participants today.
I mean, keep it simple. Everyone tries to make it complicated. There's new features dropping every day. There's no way you're going to keep up with it. Keep it simple. Focus on the case studies like you heard today. Happens to everyone. Keep it simple. Your strategy should be simple. Your recovery should be simple. The situations make it complex. So you got to make everything that you're doing very focused. That would be my final thought is really try to get rid of the things you don't need. Eliminate any distractions as you can, but man, just keep it simple.
Wise words. Thank you, Nathan. Dr. Hazelton, final thoughts for you.
Accountability, transparency, owning what happened, and also not allowing the disruption to turn into dysfunction.
That's wonderful. And I mean, that the transparency is such a key word, critical word. And one of the things we're going to talk about next year in 2026 are the optics of school safety and security, and being transparent with your school community is absolutely critical, because it's better to be transparent with what you're doing, what you have in place up front. And when something bad happens, at least you now have that established with your community. So critical. Appreciate that, Hazelton. Antoinette, final thoughts from you.
I think for me, it's a matter of culture. In introducing security as a culture within your organization from the top down. I wish that we can just take Dr. Hazelton and copy and paste her into every district, because having that kind of commitment to the district to ensure that we are going to do what we need to do with the resources that we have, and we're going to figure it out together, is very, very important. So for me, it's more about having that culture of security, and I think all the other things will fall into place.
Absolutely, and that makes total sense. It all comes down to prioritization, and some things like culture trump everything else, quite frankly. And technology are tools to help augment what you're already doing and what you need to do. So I want to thank all of you for attending today. Thank you, Dr. Hazelton. Thank you, Antoinette. Thank you, Nathan.